The sun sank low behind the ridge of thorny hills, painting the African sky in strokes of copper and purple. In the heart of the village, smoke from evening fires curled upward, carrying the smell of millet porridge and roasted maize. Yet beneath the ordinary hum of life, there was another sound, low whispers, drifting from hut to hut, as if the air itself carried gossip. They spoke of the girl. She was 19, slight in frame, her eyes dark as the midnight river, her hair always falling loose around her face. She lived quietly at the edge of the compound, yet her presence stirred unease in every corner. Whenever she walked to fetch water or carried wood on her head, children followed at a distance, laughing in cruel mimicry. They cupped their hands around their mouths, pretending to murmur like her. "Look, she's talking again," they would hiss. Talking to no one. To the elders, her habit was proof of something darker. They claimed she was cursed, a vessel filled with restless spirits. "No girl should speak so much to herself," one old woman muttered, shaking her head. "The ancestors are listening and they do not like it." But the girl never shouted back. She never defended herself. She simply kept moving, lips stirring with words only she could hear. Her stepmother, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice like dry reeds, never missed an opportunity to feed the fire. Standing in the village square one evening, she announced to anyone willing to listen, "She speaks to shadows. I have seen it. She whispers when the room is empty. She laughs when no one is near. Do you think this is normal? No, it is a curse." The crowd nodded, murmuring their agreement. Superstition was strong in their bones, stronger even than logic. If a child fell ill, if a harvest failed, if goats strayed into the forest and never returned, someone must be blamed. And who better than the girl who spoke to herself when no one else was listening? The cruelty was subtle at first. Averted gazes, withheld greetings, food withheld from her bowl at communal feasts. But then it grew bolder. Children shouted "Mad One" as she passed. Men laughed and asked what voices she was hearing that day. Women whispered prayers when she drew water from the well, afraid her shadow might fall on them. Loneliness wrapped around her like a second skin. Every night, as the village settled into silence, she would sit by the threshold of her small hut and murmur softly, words flowing like a secret river. To others it was madness. To her it was survival. No one asked what she was saying. No one cared that the words were prayers, pleas to her late mother for guidance, cries to the sky for comfort, fragments of songs she could not bear to keep locked inside. Her voice was the only company she had. And yet, the more she spoke, the deeper the villagers' fear grew. They began to believe the stepmother's whispers, that she had opened her lips to the unseen, that she was answering voices that did not belong in the world of the living. As night drew its curtain across the sky, and owls began their mournful calls, the girl sat once more in silence broken only by her own voice. But the village was listening. The village was judging. And in their eyes, every word she spoke was not the cry of a lonely heart, it was the echo of shadows. Long before the whispers branded her as cursed, the girl had been different. She was once known for her brightness, her laughter that rang clear as the morning bell, her kindness that softened even the most hardened heart. Children used to gather around her because she told the best stories, tales her mother had whispered into her ear at night. Her voice could turn dust into dreams. But then her mother died. The illness came like a thief in the dry season, sudden and merciless. One day her mother was stirring porridge by the hearth, the next she lay beneath a blanket, eyes glazed with fever, lips cracked and silent. The girl was only 14 then. She sat by her mother's side, clutching her hand, begging the ancestors to take her instead. But prayers did not stop death. When the morning drumbeat called the village awake, her mother's breath was gone. From that day, silence took root in her heart. She no longer laughed. Her songs faded. Her words shrank to murmurs spoken only to herself, fragments of memories, scraps of stories, prayers she repeated like a charm to keep her mother near. At first the villagers pitied her. They said, "She mourns. Let her grief pass." But grief did not pass. It became her shadow. When she walked to the well, her lips moved as though carrying on an invisible conversation. When she cooked, she muttered softly as though repeating her mother's forgotten recipes. When she slept, faint whispers slipped from her mouth, like half-dreamed prayers. It was not madness, it was her way of holding on. But the village did not see it that way. The stepmother saw her chance. Jealous of the affection the girl had once received, she twisted mourning into suspicion. "She speaks to spirits," the woman whispered to her neighbors. "When she mutters, it is not grief, it is witchcraft." Her voice, low and venomous, dripped into the ears of those already uneasy. And they listened. At first they only watched the girl more closely. But when bad things began to happen, when the rains delayed, when goats gave birth to weaklings, when a child's fever lasted too long, the stepmother's lies found soil to grow. "Do you not see?" she hissed. The second voice follows her. Misfortune follows her. She carries bad luck in her breath. The villagers nodded. To them it made sense. Misfortune always had to come from somewhere. The girl did not defend herself. How could she? To explain that she spoke to her mother's memory would only make them laugh. So she endured in silence, and silence made the lies stronger. Once, a neighbor saw her whispering beside her mother's grave, and by the next day the whole village was saying she was feeding the dead with her voice. Another time, children claimed they heard her speaking while no one else was in the room, and so they ran screaming, certain she had summoned spirits. Every story twisted her further from the truth. Even the smallest kindness she showed became something dark. When she tended to a sick goat, the owner later claimed its recovery was unnatural, as if a spirit had entered the animal. When she comforted a crying child, the parents pulled the little one away, fearing she would plant bad luck with her words. It was the stepmother's whisper that sealed it. Standing in the square, she said, "Do you not notice? She has two voices, one for herself and one for the shadows. When she speaks, it is not always her own." That night, when the wind howled through the huts and rattled the roofs, villagers swore they heard faint murmuring outside their doors. By morning, the rumor had spread like fire. The girl's second voice wandered at night. From then on, her isolation was complete. Neighbors crossed the path to avoid her. Children made signs against evil when she walked by. She was no longer simply a grieving daughter, she was something to be feared. And still she whispered, for it was the only thread that kept her tethered to the world. The baobab tree stood at the heart of the village, its vast roots twisting like the ribs of the earth itself. Beneath its shadow, the elders gathered, their voices heavy with the weight of tradition. The villagers pressed close, whispering and muttering, all eyes fixed on the matter that had divided them for weeks. The girl who spoke to no one, or to someone they could not see. Her stepmother stood at the front, face pinched with false sorrow. She bowed to the elders, then raised her voice, smooth and sharp as a blade. "She is dangerous," she said. "We all hear her murmurs. We all see her lips moving when no one else is there. Tell me, elders, if she speaks to someone unseen, who answers her back? Spirits do not rest if fed. They come for the living." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some villagers nodded eagerly, fear flickering in their eyes. Others shifted uncomfortably, torn between suspicion and pity. An old man named Cato, whose hair was white as ash, spoke slowly. "She is a child who lost her mother too soon. Grief makes the tongue restless. Perhaps she talks only to herself." But another woman interrupted, voice sharp. "Then why do children hear whispers when they pass her hut? Why do the goats shy from her shadow? Are these not signs?" The debate grew louder, swelling like a storm. Some cried for mercy, saying she was only lonely, that she had harmed no one. Others hissed that loneliness itself was a cloak for evil, that the ancestors punished villages that ignored omens. The girl sat apart, knees drawn to her chest, eyes fixed on the ground. Her silence was like a shield, but inside her heart pounded. Every word spoken above her head weighed upon her shoulders like stones. Her stepmother's voice rose again, clear and unwavering. "You say she is only lonely. Then let me ask, why does she not laugh as other girls do? Why does she not join in song? Why does she whisper in the dark, when even dogs grow restless at the sound? Tell me, elders, if she talks to someone we cannot see, then that someone must answer." The crowd fell into a hush. Even those who had defended the girl found no quick words to challenge that logic. Superstition was an easy net, it caught even the innocent. Elder Cato leaned on his staff. "We cannot punish shadows," he said. "But we cannot ignore them either. Fear spreads quicker than truth. If the people doubt her, then their doubt may itself become a curse." The other elders nodded gravely. Their duty was not just to seek justice, but to keep harmony, to prevent fear from tearing the village apart. At last, the council's leader, a tall man with scarred cheeks, lifted his hand. The murmurs fell silent. His voice carried the weight of finality. "We will not yet call her cursed," he said. "But neither can we close our eyes. From this day forward she will be watched. If she is harmless, let her prove it by her deeds. If she is dangerous, the truth will reveal itself. The ancestors see all." A wave of uneasy murmurs spread across the gathering. Some were disappointed, wanting punishment, wanting blood. Others sighed with relief that she had not yet been cast out. The stepmother's lips tightened, but she bowed as though satisfied. Inside her heart burned. Watching was not enough. She wanted the girl broken. Still, she knew patience could be sharper than any knife. That night, when the crowd dispersed and the girl returned to her hut, she felt eyes following her every step. Children whispered from the shadows. Neighbors stared too long. Even in her silence, she could feel the net of suspicion tightening. And high above, the baobab tree loomed in the moonlight, its branches like arms raised in judgment, as though the very earth itself had joined the council. The verdict had been spoken. She would be watched. And under such eyes, even the innocent could stumble into guilt. The night pressed down on the village like a heavy cloak, thick with heat and silence. Inside her small hut, the girl sat on the mat her mother had woven years ago, her knees drawn to her chest. Her lips moved faintly, though no words escaped loud enough to carry. She whispered into the dark, a murmur no one was meant to hear. But outside, shadows gathered, children restless and cruel, sent by whispers from their parents and emboldened by the stepmother's lies. Bare feet patted against the earth as they crept toward her hut. They pressed their faces to the cracks in the walls, stifling giggles. "Who are you talking to?" one boy hissed, voice mocking. Another chimed in, tapping on the mud wall with a stick. "Is your friend in there with you? Or are you speaking to ghosts?" The others joined in, their laughter sharp and merciless. "Answer us, ghost girl. Sing to the shadows like you always do. Talk to yourself, maybe they'll talk back." The girl froze, every muscle tightening. Their voices cut deeper than whips, not because of the words but because they echoed what the whole village believed. She pressed her palms to her ears, but the thin walls carried every sound. Her lips trembled and still she whispered, though quieter as though even the dark needed reassurance. Her voice was barely audible, a breath against silence. "I am not alone." The words were meant for herself, a prayer, a plea. But the children outside gasped, eyes widening. They had heard the faint murmur through the crack in the hut. "She's talking again," one cried, fear mixing with delight. Another boy shrieked with laughter. "See? She admits it." They began to circle the hut, stomping and chanting, their voices high and cruel. "Ghost girl, ghost girl, talking to the night. Ghost girl, ghost girl, shadows are her friends." The girl curled tighter on her mat, hands shaking. Tears burned her eyes but did not fall. She whispered again into the darkness, voice cracking, desperate. "Please, don't let them hear me." As if in answer, the air shifted. A low rumble rolled across the sky, distant but heavy, like the growl of something vast awakening. The laughter faltered for a moment as the children glanced up, startled. "Thunder," one muttered. Another forced a laugh, though unease tugged at the edges of it. "It's nothing. Just the sky." But the rumble came again, closer this time, long and low. The children shuffled nervously, their game losing its sweetness. The hut seemed to stand taller in the brief silence between the echoes of sound. Inside, the girl clutched her chest, heart racing. She did not know if the thunder was chance, or if her whisper had somehow carried further than she dared believe. The walls of the hut seemed to breathe with her, shadows bending across the floor like listening ears. The children muttered among themselves, voices breaking with unease. Then, as another roll of thunder cracked across the night sky, they scattered, bare feet thudding as they fled into the village, their chants dying in the dark. The girl was left alone again, the night heavy around her. Yet her heart beat with a strange rhythm, half terror, half something else, an awareness that her whispers might not vanish into emptiness after all. Outside, the thunder faded into silence. But the silence felt different now, watchful, waiting. Midnight draped the village in a blanket of silence, broken only by the croak of distant frogs and the sigh of wind through the trees. In her hut, the girl lay restless, unable to sleep. She sat upright, knees pulled close, lips moving in the way that had become her only comfort. Whispering to herself. Whispering to no one. Her voice was soft, trembling, almost like a child reciting secrets to the night. "You are with me. I know you hear me. If I stop speaking, I will vanish too. So I must keep speaking." The words fluttered into the shadows, fragile as moth wings. She had spoken them many times before, never expecting an answer. It was only ritual now, her way of reminding herself she was still alive. But that night something shifted. The air inside the hut thickened, as though it had swallowed the world outside. Her skin prickled, the hairs on her arms rising. A chill moved through her chest like water. And then, a voice. Not hers. It came from her own mouth, yet it did not belong to her. Deep, echoing, too heavy to be mortal. It rolled through the small hut like the hum of earth itself. I have always listened. Her body froze, lips parted. She had not formed those words, she knew it as surely as she knew her own heartbeat. She gasped, but the sound caught in her throat. The voice came again, stronger this time, every syllable a vibration in her bones. Shall I speak louder? The girl clutched her chest, shaking violently. She tried to form words, to whisper back, but her own voice refused her. Only shallow breaths escaped. Her eyes darted around the hut, wide with terror. The shadows seemed to sway, bending as if listening with her. The small clay lamp flickered wildly, its flame stretching tall, then shrinking low. She pressed her palms to her mouth, desperate to hold the words in. But when she did, the voice only resonated deeper, vibrating in her ribs, pressing outward from her very skin. You spoke to me. Night after night. I answered with silence because you were not ready. But you kept calling, and I have come. She whimpered, a sound barely audible. Her thoughts raced. Was this madness? A spirit? A curse sent by her stepmother? Or had her loneliness carved an opening for something to step through? Her body trembled, caught between awe and dread. Part of her wanted to scream for help. Another part feared anyone hearing, because if they did, they would know her whispers had never been alone. The shadows in the hut deepened, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw movement where no movement should be. A darker shade within the dark, watching. Her lips, trembling uncontrollably, moved again, her own this time. She forced the faintest whisper. Who are you? The answer came with a sound like wind rushing through hollow wood. I am what answers when no one else will. I am the voice that waited. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, heart hammering so loud she feared the whole village might hear it. She stumbled backward, pressing herself into the wall, shaking her head as though she could dislodge the presence from her body. The voice softened then, almost tender, though its echo still carried the weight of something not human. You are not alone, child. You never were. Her tears spilled at those words, not from comfort but from terror. She shook her head violently, whispering through clenched teeth. No, no, no. The flame in the clay lamp sputtered, almost extinguished before flaring tall once more. Outside, the sky groaned with a distant roll of thunder, though no storm had been seen on the horizon. Her hut felt impossibly small, as though the walls were closing in. She pressed both hands against her ears, desperate to silence it. But the voice was not outside, it was inside, curling in her marrow, echoing from her own chest. It whispered once more, low and steady. They mocked you for speaking to yourself. But you never spoke to yourself. You spoke to me. Her body stiffened. A strange calm seeped through her, though her face was pale with fear. She could not deny it anymore. The presence had always been there, lurking just beyond her words. She had only given it shape with her persistence. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Then the voice spoke again, softer still, but carrying a promise that both terrified and entranced her. And now, I will speak back. The next night fell heavy and strange. The village, usually loud with drums and laughter, was restless, hushed, and uneasy. Dogs barked in sudden fits, only to whimper and fall silent. An unseen weight seemed to press down upon the huts, settling into the very soil. Inside her small hut at the edge of the square, the girl sat trembling by her clay lamp. Her lips moved again as they always had, whispering into the dark. But this time she was no longer alone. For every word she whispered, another voice answered. Hers, fragile, quivering. The other, deep, resonant, echoing as though spoken from inside a cave. What will they do to me? She whispered. They will bow or they will burn, the voice replied through her own lips. Her hands shook. She clasped them over her mouth, but the words still poured out. You are mine now. Do not fear their laughter. The sound slipped into the night like smoke. Thin walls could not contain it. Villagers nearby stirred awake, blinking in confusion, ears pricked to what they thought were two people conversing. A man nudged his wife. Do you hear that? She clutched her shawl tightly, whispering, There are two voices. Words spread swiftly, carried by fear faster than fire. Within moments, figures crept from their huts, eyes wide and wary, moving closer to the girl's dwelling. They crouched low, listening. What they heard froze their blood. Her soft, trembling voice asked, Why do they hate me? The other voice replied, smooth and thunderous. Because they fear what they cannot silence. Gasps broke the night. Mothers clutched children to their chests, elders pressed trembling hands to their ears. Some villagers fled back into their huts, muttering prayers. Others lingered, drawn by a dreadful fascination. She is not alone, someone whispered. She has a companion. No, another hissed, voice sharp with terror. Not a companion. A spirit. From the other world. The voices inside did not stop. Her, I wish to be free. The other, then let me speak. I will unchain you. The villagers outside shuddered. The cadence was wrong, unnatural. It was not a girl and her friend, it was one mouth carrying two worlds. Suddenly her clay lamp flared, sending shadows dancing against the walls of her hut. From outside, the villagers swore the shadows split into two shapes. One small and human, the other larger, twisted, towering. Children began to cry. An elder struck the ground with his staff. This is no girl. This is a vessel. Panic spread. Some villagers threw handfuls of dust and herbs into the air, desperate to ward off evil. Others chanted prayers under their breath, though their voices trembled more with fear than faith. Inside, the girl clutched her chest, eyes wide, heart slamming against her ribs. She wanted to stop, to silence whatever had taken root in her, but the other voice surged stronger with each word, as though feeding on her fear and the villagers' whispers. The deep voice bellowed suddenly, breaking the night. You named her cursed. Now hear the truth. Every villager froze. Silence followed, until the sound of footsteps scattered. Mothers dragged children away. Men bolted for their huts. Only a few remained, frozen with terror, too afraid to move. From the shadows the stepmother watched. Her face, once smug with triumph at silencing the girl, was now pale as bone. She clutched her shawl so tightly her knuckles gleamed white. The voice had not said her name, not yet. But she knew it could. Inside, the girl wept silently, though her lips still moved. The two voices rose and fell, weaving a strange, haunting dialogue that no one outside could forget. By dawn, the village was in uproar. Rumors tangled with fear. She speaks with the dead. No, she speaks with something worse. She is not one but two. The girl remained in her hut, exhausted, hollow-eyed, lips raw from moving through the night. She had not slept. She knew they would never look at her as only a girl again. She had become something else in their eyes, an omen, a messenger, a haunted vessel. And the voice, calm and patient, lingered within her chest, whispering as the morning sun rose. They mocked you for speaking to yourself. Now they know you were never alone. The sun rose heavy that morning, but its warmth brought no comfort to the village. Whispers spread faster than smoke, curling into every hut. The silent one now speaks with two tongues. No one dared approach her, yet no one could stop staring when she walked through the square. Her stepmother, who once carried herself proudly, now shrank into the shadows of her hut. She had expected the girl's strange muttering to make her a laughingstock forever, easy prey for blame. Instead, the whispers had grown sharp and dangerous, turning like spears toward their source. That evening, as the girl walked past the well, villagers followed at a distance, wide-eyed. Some clutched charms, others muttered prayers. They did not dare speak to her. They only listened. And then, without warning, her lips parted. The girl's own soft tone trembled, I am hungry. But another voice rolled out after it, low, echoing, undeniable. She starved me. She envied me. The villagers gasped. All eyes turned toward the stepmother's hut. The stepmother froze inside, blood turning to ice. No, not here. Not now. The girl stumbled forward, shaking her head as if to stop the sound, but the words poured out regardless. She fed herself meat but left me scraps. She told the council lies, her tongue dripping venom. She envied me even when I had nothing. The villagers murmured, unsettled. Eyes shifted between the trembling stepmother and the girl whose lips moved against her will. One old man's voice cracked through the tension. These are confessions. But whose mouth speaks them? The echoing voice laughed, chilling and bitter. Her mouth cannot hide what her hands have done. The truth drips from her, through me. The stepmother rushed out of her hut, face pale, hands raised. Lies? She screamed, though her voice shook. This is a spirit tricking you all. She was always cursed. But the girl's lips curved into a strange half-smile, and the voice spoke again, louder this time, reverberating in the square. She locked me in the yard when the storms raged. She struck me when no one watched. She told children I was cursed so they would mock me. Gasps rose. Mothers drew their children closer, men muttered in anger, and elders exchanged wary glances. The stepmother's knees weakened. Sweat gathered at her brow. She had never confessed these cruelties aloud, yet every word rang true, too sharp to be invented. Her own sins, flung into the air like spears. Desperate, she tried to cover her ears as though that would silence the voice. "Stop it," she shrieked. "Stop her. She brings demons into our homes." But the girl stood trembling, tears streaking her cheeks, her own eyes wide with terror. She wanted nothing more than silence, but the voice would not stop. Her envy burned hotter than the sun. She wanted me broken. She wanted me gone. The villagers recoiled from the stepmother. Some spat into the dust at her feet. Others muttered, "So it is true." The stepmother felt the walls of her world crumbling. Every rumor she had spun, every lie she had whispered, had been turned back upon her. And the cruelest wound of all, it was not the girl speaking. It was something greater, something unseen, that had chosen her as its target. That night the stepmother could not sleep. Every creak of the hut made her jolt upright. Every whisper of the wind sounded like the girl's voice, carrying her secrets into the world. When she closed her eyes, she saw lips moving in the dark, spilling confessions she had never uttered aloud. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the words still echoed in her skull. For the first time, the woman who had spread fear throughout the village now lived in terror herself. And the voice, patient and merciless, whispered into the night. She silenced her daughter. Now the truth silences her. The night was thick and restless, the moon smothered behind clouds. Word had traveled fast, the silent one's lips spoke with two tongues. By midnight, half the village gathered outside her hut, torches flickering, their faces drawn with fear and wonder. Some clutched charms of bone and string, others held gourds of ash water, all hoping to guard themselves from whatever dwelled within. The elders stood at the front, leaning heavily on their staffs. They had debated all evening. Was this a curse they had brought upon themselves? Or had the girl been chosen by something far older than the village? Tonight they demanded answers. Inside, the girl sat curled on the floor, hands pressed to her mouth. She could hear them outside, footsteps shifting, voices murmuring, the dry crackle of torches. Her heart hammered in her chest. She prayed silently, "Please, not again tonight." But the familiar burn began in her throat, a crawling fire that stole her breath. Her lips trembled as the first sound escaped. "Come out," an elder commanded. Slowly, trembling, she pushed aside the reed curtain and stepped into the torchlight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She looked fragile, her dress clinging to her thin frame, eyes wide with dread. Yet there was something else, something in the way her shadow bent against the ground, stretching longer than it should. A boy whispered, "She brings the other one with her." His mother yanked him back. The girl opened her mouth to speak, but it was not her voice that came first. It was the other, deep, resonant, echoing as though it rose from the belly of the earth. "You called her cursed. You mocked her loneliness. But she was never alone." The villagers gasped, stumbling back. Torches quivered in their hands as the air thickened, heavy as if the sky itself leaned closer to hear. The girl's own voice followed, faint and breaking, "Please, stop. I don't want this." But the echoing voice roared over hers. "You silenced her with scorn. You fed her sorrow night after night. And now her sorrow speaks through me." The torches flared suddenly, sparks spitting into the air. A few villagers dropped theirs, stamping frantically at the flames. Children cried, and even the elders' hands trembled. One bold man stepped forward, shouting, "Spirit, leave us. She is only a girl, why torment our homes?" The voice thundered in reply, shaking the very ground. "She was only a girl when you turned against her. She was only a girl when you let lies bury her laughter. You chose cruelty. And cruelty has called me." The crowd swayed back as though struck by wind, though no breeze stirred. The girl clutched her chest, weeping, her lips moving without her will. The stepmother, pale and trembling, tried to step forward, but the villagers blocked her path. They hissed at her, whispering of her envy, her lies, her hand in this curse. She could feel their suspicion pressing against her like spears. The voice grew louder, filling every corner of the square. "You called her, the one who talks to shadows. Now I speak from those shadows. I have always been here, waiting." The villagers sank to their knees, some crying, some covering their ears. The torches flickered wildly, their flames bending inward toward the girl, as though the fire itself obeyed the unseen presence. One elder raised his staff high, voice quaking, "Tell us, spirit, what do you want?" The girl's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting firelight though no flame touched them. Her lips curved in a way that was not her own. "What do I want?" the voice boomed. "Only the truth. The truth you buried with laughter. The truth you mocked with your fear. Now it will bury you in return." The air cracked like distant thunder. Every torch went out at once. Darkness swallowed the crowd, leaving only the sound of gasps and frantic whispers. And in that black silence, her voice and the other voice spoke together. Two tones, one mouth, overlapping in perfect, terrible harmony. She was never alone. And now, neither are you. The villagers trembled, pressed shoulder to shoulder, hearts hammering. For in the stillness, they swore they heard more than one presence breathing among them. Not just the girl. Not just the voice. But others, hundreds of faint whispers rising from the dark. The gathering had come to confront her. Instead, they left shaken, their courage cracked like old clay. By dawn, no one dared mock her again. For they now believed what the voice had told them. She was never alone. The dawn after the midnight gathering was unlike any other. The village square lay hushed as though the air itself held its breath. Men and women avoided the girl's hut, but whispers followed her name like smoke. Children no longer mocked her, they clung to their mother's skirts, staring with wide, fearful eyes. That evening the elders summoned her beneath the baobab tree. Torches ringed the place, their light flickering nervously against old bark. The entire village gathered, pressed tight, as though being close to one another would shield them from what they did not understand. The girl was brought forward. Her hands shook, but she did not resist. She had no power over what lived inside her, and they all knew it. One elder, his voice sharp with both fear and authority, struck the ground with his staff. "Speak, spirit. Who are you? Why do you torment us through this child?" The girl's lips parted, but it was not her voice that filled the night. The other answered, low, echoing so deep it seemed to vibrate through the earth beneath their feet. "We are the forgotten, the wronged, those you cast aside." Gasps broke through the crowd. Some covered their ears, others clutched charms to their chests. The stepmother's knees buckled, and she had to be held up by two women at her side. Another elder shouted, trembling, "You, spirits of the dead?" The voice replied, "Yes. Those whose graves you walk upon without prayer. Those whose bones lie beneath your fields. Those whose stories you silenced as you silenced her." The girl's eyes brimmed with tears, but her mouth continued moving without her will. The words poured like a river that could not be dammed. "You mocked her because she spoke when none answered. But we were always there, listening. Now at last we answer." The crowd rippled with panic. Women clutched their children tighter. Men stumbled backward, eyes darting as if the spirit stood among them, unseen. One elder sank to his knees, crying out, "Forgive us. We did not know." But the voice thundered, "You knew. You chose to turn away. You chose cruelty. And cruelty does not vanish, it waits, it grows, it returns." Suddenly, several villagers collapsed where they stood, shaking as though struck by invisible hands. Cries erupted, women wailing, men shouting prayers. Some begged forgiveness aloud, confessing sins long buried, thefts, betrayals, jealousies. Secrets spilled into the square like blood from an open wound. The girl wept silently, hands clutched at her throat. She wanted to scream for them to stop, for the voice to stop, but nothing she did could quiet it. The voice roared above their cries. "You call yourselves the living, but you walk with more death in your hearts than those in their graves. You feared her because she spoke to us, yet it was not her curse. It was your guilt." One woman tore at her hair, sobbing. A man pressed his face to the earth, whispering, "Spare me, spare me." The stepmother shook, unable to look at her stepdaughter, her mouth dry and lips bloodless. The night grew heavier, as though the weight of every soul wronged pressed down upon them. The torches flickered wildly, though no wind blew. Shadows writhed against the tree trunks like restless hands. Finally the elders, broken and trembling, raised their voices as one. "What must we do?" For a moment, silence. Only the sound of the villagers' sobs and the girl's ragged breathing. Then the voice replied, slower, colder, like the rumble of a storm yet to break. "Judgment is already upon you. The forgotten do not ask for offerings. We demand remembrance. Live with the truth you buried, and know, every silence, every cruelty, every lie will one day speak back." The last word echoed long after the girl's lips had stilled, rolling into the night like thunder across the plains. No one moved. No one dared breathe. The villagers had begged forgiveness, but what they received was worse. A reminder that judgment had already begun and there was no escape. The days that followed the judgment under the baobab tree changed everything. The girl who once lived as a shadow, whispered about and mocked, no longer walked unnoticed. Now, when she stepped into the square, conversation stopped. Children who once laughed at her covered their mouths and fled. Men and women bowed their heads, afraid her lips might part and release truths they wished to keep buried. She was no longer simply a girl. She was something else, both herself and the vessel of voices no one dared name aloud. At dawn, some villagers left small offerings at her hut: bowls of millet, strips of cloth, gourds of milk. None dared knock, none spoke a word. They would set the gifts at her threshold and hurry away, as if even their footsteps might draw the spirit's gaze. Others did not come near at all. They crossed themselves with charms and avoided her path. Doors shut quickly when she passed. Whispers clung to her: she carries the forgotten. She speaks with the dead. She felt the weight of it all. Sometimes she wished for her old silence, for the days when only children mocked her. Fear was worse than laughter. And yet, beneath the fear she sensed something else, a strange kind of power. One evening an old woman hobbled to her hut, trembling, leaning on a crooked stick. The girl opened the door cautiously, but before she could speak, the woman fell to her knees. "Bless me," the woman whispered. "I have lost my sons. Tell me if they forgive me." The girl's throat tightened. She shook her head, trying to say she could not. But then her lips parted on their own. Another voice, deep, echoing, not hers, spoke gently. "They walk with you still. The bond is not broken." The woman sobbed with relief, pressing her forehead to the earth. She left behind a pouch of dried herbs before hobbling away. News spread swiftly. Soon others came, quietly at night. They came with offerings, with questions, with fear wrapped in desperate hope. They called her Mother of Voices, the living ear of the forgotten. Some kissed the ground at her feet, others could not bear to look at her at all. Her stepmother, once loud and cruel, had grown quiet as stone. She no longer commanded, no longer spread lies. When the girl entered a room, the stepmother kept her head bent low, hands clenched in her lap. She dared not meet her stepdaughter's gaze. To look was to invite the voice that mocked lies and bared secrets. One night, as the girl walked through the square, she caught her stepmother watching her from the shadows. The woman's eyes were wide, almost pleading, but she turned away before a word could be exchanged. The girl felt both pity and cold justice stir in her chest. Yet not all the villagers sought blessings. Some feared her more with every passing day. They said her hut pulsed with whispers, that shadows lingered at her windows long after the moon had set. A few men muttered that she should be cast out entirely, that nothing good could come from living so near the dead. But none were brave enough to raise the idea before the council. The girl's life became a strange balance, feared by many, sought out by others. She never knew when her lips would belong to her, and when they would open for the voice within. Sometimes late at night she pleaded silently in her heart, "Leave me, please leave me." But the voice always answered, not unkindly, not cruelly, but with an inevitability that chilled her. "We are bound. You speak for us and we for you. Alone you were mocked. Together you are unbreakable." She curled into herself then, rocking in the darkness, unsure if she had been cursed or crowned. Days turned to weeks. The village shifted around her, its rhythm changed forever. Where once she was a source of ridicule, now she was the silent center of their fear and reverence. Women whispered that to touch her hand could bring luck. Men avoided her shadow. Children were warned never to mock her again, lest the voices answer them too. Her stepmother shrank further into herself, her once sharp tongue now dulled by terror. She no longer controlled the household. She did not speak against her stepdaughter. She did not even dare to call her by name. For the girl there was no return to who she had been. She was herself, yes, but she was also the voices, the weight of all the forgotten, the judgment that never slept. And though she wished for her songs, for her true voice, she knew that even if it never returned, she would never be small again. She was feared. She was sacred. She was not alone. Years passed, and the girl who once spoke alone became less a memory and more a story whispered in every corner of the village. Her hut, though weathered with time, still stood at the edge of the path, its doorway dark, its roof sagging with vines. No one dared tear it down and no one dared move too close. For at night, when the wind pressed against its walls, it was said the air inside still stirred with whispers. Two voices. Always two. One, soft and trembling, the girl's voice, carrying the echo of who she once was. The other, deeper, heavier, like the weight of stones rolling in a riverbed. They spoke together, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in a strange, unsettling discord. Children were warned never to linger by the hut. Parents hissed the lesson into their ears: never mock the lonely, for someone may be listening. They told them the tale of the girl who was shamed for her muttering, how the laughter of others had summoned something waiting in the silence. Some swore that on moonless nights, when the square was still, her figure could be seen walking from the hut to the river. A slender form draped in shadows, head bowed, lips moving. Those who were brave enough to follow said the sound of her voice carried across the water, weaving with another deeper tone. Together, the two voices rippled over the river like a chant that did not belong to the living alone. The elders grew old, their bones brittle, yet none dared deny the story. They knew too well what had happened under the baobab tree when her stepmother's secrets spilled from her lips. That memory lived like a scar in the village, a warning too sharp to fade. Her stepmother herself did not last long. Some said she wasted away, eaten not by sickness but by fear. In her final days she refused to be left alone, terrified of the sound of her stepdaughter's laughter in her dreams, always doubled, always echoed by something greater. When she was buried, the goats bleated all night, and the wind carried whispers through the square. Time moved on, but the girl's presence did not. She became less a person than a legend. People brought offerings to her hut, bowls of grain, beads, charms wrapped in cloth. They left them at the threshold, praying not for blessings but for mercy, that the voices would not call out their names. And always the hut seemed to breathe. On stormy nights, when thunder split the sky, villagers barred their doors and covered their ears. It was then that the sound returned strongest. Laughter, hers light and bright as it once had been, rose above the storm. But it was never alone. Twined with it came the deeper voice, heavy and resonant, answering her joy with its own rolling thunder. Together they filled the air, weaving a chorus that made the walls tremble and the ground quiver as though the very earth listened. Some swore that if you stood at the riverbank during such storms, you could see her silhouette lit by lightning, her head thrown back in laughter, the unseen companion looming at her side. Others claimed her eyes glowed like coals when the clouds opened, reflecting the power of the voice that had never left her. Whether spirit, curse or gift no one dared say. The villagers simply lived with it, carried the tale forward and passed down the warning. Never mock the lonely, they told their children, for you never know who might be listening. And once the lonely are answered, they are never truly alone again. And so her legend endured, not as the girl mocked for her muttering, not as the silent one cursed to speak for the dead, but as the vessel of a bond too strange to sever. When storms came, when laughter and thunder rolled together across the sky, the people remembered. They huddled in their huts, whispering her name, listening to the double voice that echoed between heaven and earth. The girl who once spoke to herself was gone. But the voices remained. Together. Forever.